Welcome, critters. I'm Claire Jones, your devoted host of the Sacred Reading CR podcast, where we discuss and examine Critical Role episodes, plot lines, characters, and players through the lens of sacred reading practices. This particular episode is about Campaign 1, Episode 39, Part 1, and joining me today is Petall.
Hello.
So, the icebreaker that I found for today is an interesting one. If you could set up a teleporter in your house that could only go to one location, like it routinely goes to that one location, where would that location be?
Oh, one location. I think, hmm. See, I could do like my drive to work isn't that bad. I don't mind it. So I think instead of doing, I think what I would, and this is kind of like a little bit of a sneaky answer, but because I like to travel to various places to visit a bunch of my friends and flights, I have the worst luck with flights, let me tell you. And part of that is because where I live, I have to take at least two flights to get almost anywhere because the airport in my city is quite small. There's only a handful of places that it flies directly to, the majority of those being like large Canadian cities. And so I think if I could set up a teleporter anywhere just to make my travel easier and make it that I could have direct flights, I would teleport to the Toronto airport so that I could book all my flights out of the Toronto airport.
That's such a practical answer. Like, I feel
I
like,
just have had, like, if you'd had the flight experience that I've had, the amount of times that I've been delayed and had to stay overnight places, in the summer when I was flying home from Gen Con, I got stranded in, Calgary for like a few days because there was a massive storm when I had a layover there. And that was a nightmare. And if I could just minimize the chances of my flights getting delayed and canceled by cutting down on the number of connections that I have, that would be beautiful.
well, I just hope that your bad luck doesn't continue with all of the plane crashes we've been having lately.
I know. I've been worried about that.
It's so funny because I haven't been traveling much at all since the pandemic started, but this year I'm traveling a lot. And I'm like, of course it would be this year when all the plane crashes start when I'm actually traveling.
Yeah.
I think when most people get this question, they think of like exotic locations. Like, I want a direct teleportation to Maui or Bali or, somewhere where they can enjoy themselves. But I honestly just want a direct teleporter to my mom's house.
Nice.
She is all the way across the country from me at this point, and it would just be so nice to just like pop in and have like a glass of wine with her in the evenings and
Hmm.
have that mom time because I need that mom time, at least nowadays. I really do.
Yeah.
I know it's different when you live by your parents, but
Hmm.
it's been a while since I've lived within driving distance of my parents. It's been almost 10 years, over 10 years at this point. So.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I am going home for spring break this year.
Oh,
I am
nice.
very worried about the flights. But over spring break, I'm also going up to the Chicago live show for
Exciting.
because it's within driving distance of my hometown. So I'll be seeing the parents and seeing Critical Role at the same time.
That's incredible.
Yeah, yeah, it would be great. It will be great. So please join us as we embark on this exciting adventure in story analysis and self-reflection in order to deepen our understanding of ourselves and the world around us. As always, we love hearing your own insights and stories as well, so please comment, like, subscribe below, and ready? All right, let's dive in. Vox Machina has recently returned to Amon and they encountered Scanlan's old band, Dr. Dransel's spectacular traveling troupe. And not only does Scanlan discover that he has a daughter who travels with the troupe, but Dransel also convinces the group to investigate the manor that used to belong to General Krieg, who was a member of the Taldori Council, I believe, if I'm remembering that correctly, that they had slain pre-stream when they had discovered that he was actually a blue dragon. So the group entered the house in the previous episode and went through the portal that took them to the dragon's old lair when they had suddenly been attacked by a massive purple worm. The battle starts with Vex, Keyleth, and Pike scattering to get cover. Grog throws his javelin of lightning, and Vax notices that the beast tracks physical movement. He manages to hit it with his dagger so it burrows underground, then bursts up from below him, and he just manages to escape its teeth. Scanlan casts Eye Bite to sicken the worm and inspires Vex. Keyleth instructs the team to get into view and within range of what she says is a fly spell. Percy shoots but misses, and Vex has 4 arrows hit it. Pike then skips her turn as instructed by Keyleth. Grog hits twice in a frenzied rage, and the worm starts to look rough, but another similar sized worm without a stinger bursts out of the ground on the other side of Grog. It sprays ice shards towards Grog and Vax, damaging the other worm in the process. Keyleth moves toward the center of the cavern, then turns herself, Percy, Vax, and Grog into mist form through Windwalk. And they realize that they are now only limited to dashing in their mist form. They cannot actually attack because Marisha didn't read the spell thoroughly. And they can also choose to slowly revert to change back to their actual forms over the course of a minute, which is 10 rounds of battle. Vax begins to turn back as the worms attack Scanlan, who is not in mist form. He fails to protect himself with cutting words and gets swallowed, trying to escape the digestive tract by casting Thunderwave from inside the worm. Percy also goes to a corner and starts trying to revert from the mist form. Vex repositions silently, then conjures a barrage of arrows toward the stalactites in the cave ceiling. Wow. Stalactites in the cave ceiling. Say that 10 times fast. Which fall on one of the worms. Pike, who is also not missed, casts Flame Strike. Vax and the first worm are hit by the frost breath from the other worm, and the team realizes that they aren't actually allies of each other. On Keyleth's turn, Matt does rule that a positive unwanted spell should be able to be dispelled at will by the caster, because it's also realized that the spell should have taken a minute to cast. So it shouldn't have happened in general. They revert and fix everything. Keyleth dispels the effect so that the party can attack. She brings down some rocks in the process. Vax dimension doors himself and Vex away from the worms. The first worm digs underground, and Scanlan casts Dimension Door to escape that worm who had swallowed him, and then inspires Keyleth. Grog and Percy hold their turns until the worms return. Vex misses 2 attacks, and Pike calls down another flame strike on the other worm. The worm bites Keyleth, who casts Blight as payback and heals herself. Vax asks Pike for healing, then daggers the visible worm, but the first worm bursts out of the ground underneath him and devours him. Percy misfires, but does manage to shoot and kill it with his other gun. Grog cuts it open with Craven Edge, but he also hits Vax and kills him as well. Scanlan, Percy, and Vex attack the remaining worm, and Pike brings Vax back to consciousness. So Grog recklessly attacks and kills the first worm with Craven Edge, and as the battle ends, he seeks the blade's approval. He covers up his whispering to the sword by repeating his question aloud to the party, and they all argue a bit about whether they should leave or loot. Grog takes the initiative and starts rage looting the gold pile, assisted by Scanlan's Big V's hand. Vex shows her trust issues and monitors them as they do so. As Keyleth starts looting the worms' bodies and acquires a mandible and blood, Vax takes a rest on Trinket. Vex tries to get some of the Frostworm armor, but she gives up when it proves difficult and goes back to taking gold. Percy goes to check the frozen man, who looks like he might have been frozen by the Frostworm, and Keyleth starts thawing his feet with the expectation of being able to move him, but a larger purple worm interrupts them, and the party runs towards the teleportation circle. As they run, they realize that the new worm is actually an adult version of the previous ones who were adolescents. But they safely return to Krieg's Manor, and that's where they break for the episode. So, what do we think of this chaotic first half?
It was so chaotic. There was a lot going on there, but also in the grand scheme of things, not a lot happened. Uh,
I
I
know.
think, um, yeah, it's interesting the whole thing with the mist spell that ends up taking up most of the time of this portion of the episode.
Yeah.
Uh, and yeah, that's kind of the biggest thing that drew my attention.
Yeah, it was interesting because I did see Laura getting frustrated with Marisha too throughout this episode. Like it was very subtle, but she had some like different looks that were going on. And I was like, oh, this is the beginning of you guys like trying to not only work as a group in game, but work as a group in person as well.
Hmm.
Haven't hit their stride yet in terms of understanding what everyone's strengths and weaknesses are within the group context. And it was very fascinating.
Yeah.
Especially when you compare it to later campaigns and later episodes. I went straight from watching this episode last night to watching, I'm doing a rewatch of campaign 2 right now. It's like my fourth rewatch of the campaign because
Yeah, I
it's
was
my
just about
favorite
to ask
campaign.
how many times you've
Yeah,
rewatched
I'm pretty
Campaign
sure
2 because I
it's
know you do it a lot.
yeah, I'm pretty sure it's fourth rewatch for me, like of the whole campaign, but I'm right at the beginning of it, and it's jarring to go from watching these early Vox Machina episodes to going to the early Mighty Nine episodes and just seeing the vast difference in their communication styles with each other.
Yeah, well, it's jarring even to go because the last episode that I of Critical Role in general that I watched before watching this one of the main cast was the finale for
Mhm.
Critical Role
Campaign 3.
Campaign 3, and so that's a big jump
That's a
there.
big jump.
And
Yeah, that's a much bigger jump for sure. Um, but yeah, it's interesting. I mean, there's been one of the prevailing jokes about campaign one is like the thanks Keyleth joke of Keyleth messing up a lot of spells and a lot of strategic moves throughout campaign one. And I think this is just one of those examples.
yeah, but it's also kind of one of the things that I do find charming about campaign one of Critical Role, especially the early days. I know I've talked about it before, but I love seeing those kind of like early day like mistakes and
Mhm.
the growing pains. Like it can be awkward at times, of course,
Mhm.
and but it's also just really reassuring in a way because like
Mhm.
that just like not reading a spell description fully and making the wrong choice like that happens like all the time
Yeah.
in like regular D&D games
Yeah.
that people play, and it's just kind of like reassuring to know that like oh even the cast of Critical Role mess up in this way too.
And I think the tension between Matt and Marisha is really interesting with this exchange as well, because Matt made her commit to her choice with the initial, like he read the spell and was like, all right, you're misform, and these are the consequences. And definitely encouraged her to read her spells first. But he also had incomplete information when it comes to like the casting time. His
Hmm.
app that he was using had the wrong casting time on it. And so there was imperfections on everyone's sides in this. And I think Matt was also kind of, I don't know, it seemed to me that he was projecting the pressure he's feeling as like this professional DM too
Hmm.
onto his players, and in particular Marisha in that moment.
Yeah, it must be super stressful to like have this. Like, I know that at this point they've been like streaming for a while now, but as they're continuing to grow and like gain a bigger audience, it must be so stressful to suddenly have, especially with the Twitch chat being what it is,
Yeah.
having everything being critiqued and all the mistakes pointed out and all the th even things that aren't mistakes that
Yeah.
people just don't like.
Yeah.
getting pointed out and having to like I know that like I do some writing and posting stuff online and it can be hard sometimes to find a balance between like listening to your audience and giving them what they want, but also like recognizing what is helpful advice and what isn't helpful advice.
Yeah.
And because like sometimes like your audience doesn't fully know the story that you want to tell and doesn't see things the way that you're writing them.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah. I've
yeah,
been
just all
thinking
those
about this
elements.
a lot lately when it comes to being a public figure on the internet.
Hmm.
Like they are definitely because they're all most of them have built their careers around being voice actors up until this point.
Yeah.
Like yes, Liam has had stage experience. Sam has I almost said Scanlan. Sam has had stage experience. And Talison's been in several movies and TV shows and stuff like that. But I think the vast majority of their experience in interacting with the public has been from behind the scenes. They are the voices of animated characters, and so they themselves have not been put on such a platform before.
Hmm.
And it's very fascinating to see how they are all coping with it in different ways. Like, we've all heard the story about how Travis specifically grew his beard and kept his beard over time because people made fun of him for how he looked without it in the early days of
I
Critical Role.
hadn't heard about that.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think he had his beard in like the first 3 episodes of Critical Role or something like that. And then he shaved it off and showed up for like 2 episodes without it. And everyone was like, oh my God, he looks so weird without his beard. And because of that feedback, he has never shaved his beard since.
Wow, I had no idea that
Yeah, and
that
so he
was a
told the
thing.
story about how it was the feedback from the Critical Role audiences that have caused him to, he's never shaved his beard since that. And it was like, you have to go back in the episodes, but it was really early in the campaign where he showed up clean
Well,
shaven.
I think I vaguely remember it, but I just
Yeah.
kind of like didn't give it much thought.
Yeah. Yeah. And so they're all interacting with this new public figuredom in different ways. And I think Matt is stressed as fuck.
Hmm. Well,
And
he's the one who's running the whole thing. He's the one who kind of has the most pressure on
yeah,
him. Like, yeah, like the fandom was really unfair to Marisha, and there's a lot of other pressures that can come from
absolutely.
being a player, but Matt's the one who's crafting the story and is in charge of everything. So that pressure must be immense.
Yeah. 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 And there's been a lot of like objectification of the feminine players on the team.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like Laura, Marisha, Ashley, they definitely have gotten their fair share of objectification over the years. And like, I think even the example of Travis's beard is a form of objectification as well.
Yeah.
All of this because he's always been seen as the like sporty hunk of the group as well.
Uh-huh.
And I know that he's even gotten a lot of questions of like recommending workout routines to people. And like I remember watching several Talks Machina episodes where like the questions that were directed to him was like, what do you recommend for workout routines? And like one of his advice always sticks in my head is that if you don't eat before you work out, you burn 300% more calories. And I was like, he gave the advice that they were looking for. And, I think they have all adapted to this public figure space in different ways. I mean, Taliesin doesn't give a fuck. Um, but I think Sam has also he becomes more of his performer Scanlan
Hmm.
persona in front of this audience, and he's comfortable within that, but other people are not as used to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I've been thinking about it a lot lately to like segue into personal experiences because as an author, as someone who's been in the entrepreneurship space, building my own personal brands for like the last 10 years, I've somehow also ended up in personal figure space online. And one of the other things that I like to talk about with people is like everyone always thinks that viral content is like the goal. Like, especially in the world of social media, you people think that getting that one viral video is like going to change their lives, right? It's like what they're looking for, what they're going for, what they're aiming for with every piece of content. They're like, this is going to be the viral one. This is the one that's going to be viral. And I keep having to remind people that virality isn't necessarily a good thing.
Yeah.
I'm like, do you realize that when a piece of content does go viral, your audience explodes and you can't control who exactly is within that audience?
Hmm.
More times than not, when a piece of content goes viral, when it's like at the millions of views mark, it attracts a lot of people who you might not want to be attracted to you at the end of the day. And it does bring in a lot of haters. And you get hate comments, you get hate DMs, you get, all kinds of unsavory interactions on that viral content. And there's a lot of creators who are not prepared for that, take
Hmm.
it personally, and I recently read a book called Extremely Online by Taylor Lorenz. And if you're ever looking to build a presence online on social media, I highly recommend checking that book out because it is fascinating. It goes over the history of social media sites from the early 2000s when blogging just became a thing to the time of TikTok, and basically how different creators have used the different platforms in different ways and how the different platforms have adapted in different ways to meet the creators' needs and stuff like that. And one of the biggest takeaways that I had from the book was how damaging to your mental and emotional health, like being a social media influencer slash celebrity slash in like public persona can be. Like sometimes people die because of this. Like there's been influencers who've gotten shot in the face by fans just because
Hmm.
they showed up to public events and that one particular fan was unhinged enough to think like if I can't have you, no one can. You know what I mean? And like
Yeah.
shit is scary.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. It's a
I'm sure
lot.
Critical Role has dealt with that type of unwanted public attention at a certain point too.
Oh, yeah. I'm absolutely certain. They're so big, they have to have, especially in these like early days when they're still like figuring things out
Yeah.
and adapting to this.
Yeah.
But I mean, it reminds me about how often at the beginning of the of every live show they have like a disclaimer to the audience of
Yeah.
like don't call things out, don't try to tell the rules
Yeah.
and make suggestions, which
Yeah.
is just like a minor thing on the scale of
Yeah.
like unwanted
Yeah.
attention. I can only imagine how, like, what the stuff that we don't know about that
Yeah.
they've
Yeah.
experienced in terms of fan
I
interactions.
mean, they are imperfect human beings too. That's the whole
Hmm.
of what I think we're talking about here. And, just because they are on such a big visible stage doesn't mean they walk into every room like, hey, look at me, pay attention to me.
Hmm.
I
Like
remember,
they all have their lives and that they go about.
yeah,
And yeah.
I remember I went to the live show of Jox Machina in LA when Dungeons and Dragons was releasing Mordenkainen's Tomb of Foes. And the Jox Machina is Travis Willingham as well as Joe Mangello. And they also included some like professional wrestlers in this live show. It was a lot of testosterone going on. Um, and some of the Critical Role cast came by during the overall event to do like signatures before and after the show. They had a bunch of different events scheduled throughout the day. And Taliesin was one of those that like I specifically saw who was available for signatures while I was there. But while I was standing around, Travis Willingham walked right past me. because he was going into the building to start prepping for the show, but he didn't want any attention, and no one noticed him because he kept his hat down and he just like sped walked towards the door, like just don't look at me, don't look at me, don't look at me. But he walked right in front of me, and so I was like, I was like, oh my God. And the girl next to me was like, was that? And I was like, it was. But like they don't walk into these rooms expecting they don't want to be mobbed by attention when they walk in.
Yeah.
Sometimes they have to prepare themselves for that. Like Taliesin specifically had set himself up to be the distraction when Travis arrives, you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, and it just even makes me think of like what sort of interactions do they have in like grocery stores
hmm
or things like that where they get recognized out in public.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, in LA, I'm sure it's a lot more commonplace to see, you know, public
Hmm.
figures out and about. But yeah, super interesting. And it is also understandable for the group to be letting out their steam toward each other when it comes to the pressure that they're all feeling as
Yeah.
being public figures. It's not the most healthy coping mechanism, but I think it is understandable that Matthew would have that response to Marisha
Hmm.
in this
Like
moment.
we've talked about, like they're not like perfect people
Yeah,
because nobody is. And
yeah,
so, of course, especially in these early days when they're still figuring things out and things are a little less polished, of
yeah,
course, we're gonna see some of those like reactions leak through that maybe they other normally wouldn't want other people to recognize
yeah.
and see.
I mean, I think Matt got mad. I think Marisha got mad. I think Laura got mad in this episode. And I think all of their responses are valid. And it may not be the healthiest public response.
Exactly.
But yeah, the personal experiences with this, it's hitting a little close to home because I got my first hate DM this week.
Oh.
hmm So I've been exploring the world of Red Note. I don't know if you've have any experience on that app yet.
No, I haven't. I don't use it, but I've heard about it.
Yeah, so Red Note has been kind of an answer to the TikTok ban that was happening last
Hmm.
month. And it is a Chinese state-run version of TikTok. And so it is very Chinese propaganda oriented. There's a lot. It's very fascinating as an anthropologist to be on there, but it is one of the apps that has like the closest algorithm. And it's actually quite enjoyable. I like the app and I've been liking my experience on it. And I've been liking the community that I've been finding on there. And I've had a semi-viral post on it in the last couple of
Hmm.
weeks. I and it's so funny because it's a screenshot of an old Twitter post from like 2021. Like it's just literally a screenshot of a Twitter post from 2021 and like my face is over the screen talking about like my response to it. And it's like an anti-billionaire rhetoric kind of post. And I was like, this is relevant right now. And that's why I'm posting it right now. And because the culture of Red Note is very anti ostentatious wealth, there's actually like guidelines within the app's policies to not showcase wealth that is beyond a regular person's
Oh wow.
ability to hold. And because it is a very communist party Chinese propaganda app, and so they don't want to highlight extreme wealth as a result because it has very communism undertones. And so they have specifically gone after creators who have displayed gross, ostentatious displays of wealth, essentially. And so the anti-billionaire sentiment is very part of the cultural norms of Red Note, and I think that that's why the my post has been going viral. Like it's currently sitting at 23,000 views, I think, something like that.
Wow.
And I get over 100 engagements with it like every day. Like my notifications on that app is always like 99 plus wherever I look at it. Which is a little overwhelming, but I got my first hate DM as a result of the virality that I've been getting on that app this week. And I actually got called an app colonizer in this hate DM because I don't provide Chinese subtitles to the videos that I create on the app.
Hmm.
And I just think it's fascinating. Like, I personally am not offended by the hate DM. I just reported it and the app took care of it and it was fine. But that's the price of public figurdom often, is just knowing that those types of sentiments are going to be coming your way in some shape or form.
Yeah.
And I also think it's very interesting in comparison to a video that I did on TikTok. I think it was last year that also went viral. I think it went up to 45,000 views. It was about the live show that they did in London.
Mm.
And I never got any hate at all from any of the people who interacted with that particular post. And I think that also goes to show the high quality of the critter audience.
Yes.
I was like, even though that video is twice as viral as the anti-billionaire sentiment video on Red Note, I think it goes to show the quality of the audience of critters versus the quality of anti-billionaire people on Red Note.
Mm. Yeah.
Very interesting.
That does sound very interesting.
Yeah, I've been in whole like data collection analysis mode since the whole social media thing has been blowing up lately. I've been trying out RedNote, I've been trying out Blue Sky. I tried out Lemonade for a hot minute, and I tried out actually Tumblr for my author brand accounts as well. So far, Tumblr and Lemonade have been dropped out of the running though because I didn't get any engagement on them. But
Tumblr isn't really the best place to advertise things.
yeah, I wasn't necessarily advertising things, but yeah, it's just a different cultural.
Oh yeah, well I'm just thinking about just like the general culture of
Yeah,
Tumblr, and
yeah,
they're not as interested in like
yeah.
brand things and
Yeah, the one post that did really well on Tumblr was when I was talking about like self-publishing advice. But yeah, I don't think it's worth the time as a business brand more so than like a personal user when it comes to
exactly.
um,
Tumblr is great for personal use, but
yeah,
the general culture of it doesn't work as well for branding stuff.
yeah, yeah. But it has been a fascinating experiment either
I
way.
would imagine.
Yeah, I feel like such like an anthropologist. I'm just like, let me get my magnifying glass and look at what's going on here. On Blue Sky recently, I've been attracting a lot of attention from horror creators,
Interesting.
like producers, directors, actors who are in horror films and horror content media. And I'm just like, I don't know why I'm attracting you guys, but I'll take it.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. Any personal experiences for you coming to mind?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have a huge internet presence. Like, I have my accounts on things. I've got like a Tumblr and a Blue Sky and stuff like that. But I have never really gotten like hugely viral or anything like that. It's always kind of remained small. I guess kind of like what I was talking about a bit before is that I do some like writing, and it's not like book writing. There's a dragon collecting website that I am on called Flight Rising, and I write a story there about my dragons, and I just post it on the forums just for fun. And I've been actually doing it for years. I've written so many dragon stories by this point, and most of them end up being like around 200,000 words long. But anyways, as time goes on, I am kind of like growing an audience there.
Hmm.
And it's just been interesting to see, and I've kind of found myself kind of like reaching a point where I'm like, oh, like, because before when I had like a small audience, like near the beginning, I'd be like interacting with everyone
Hmm.
and kind of like befriending a lot of people. But as my audience has grown, I've been realizing that that sort of thing isn't sustainable if I want to keep having energy for writing this
Yeah.
story. I can't engage with everybody about the like I still have like a small enough number of comments that I can like respond to everybody's comments and things like that. But
Yeah.
in terms of like befriending everybody and like talking over ideas for the story, I think I might have to start kind of like not necessarily like narrowing down, but like not kind of like accepting like all the ideas that come in and all of the like because I do a lot of collaboration with other writers on Flight Rising, and so uh, um just like the amount of like collaboration like requests I've gotten and stuff like that, it's beginning to get under unsustainable as much as I would love to like collaborate with everybody. I am it's not gonna be something that I'm reaching a point where I can't do it all and I'm gonna have to find a way to choose who I collaborate with and who I don't, and in what moments I do that and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
that's kind of like a challenge because I'm like, a part of me is worried like I don't want to like hurt my audience or anything like that or hurt anybody's feelings. And, but
Hmm.
I also, like, if I keep going as it is, I'm gonna burn out and I'm not gonna be able to finish the story. I've already hit like a huge writer's block because of this sort of thing. And like I don't blame my audience. It's myself for not having those boundaries and setting up and realizing what I need and what I want to do. But like yeah, it's been quite frustrating because I've been like stuck in the same place for like about a year when I thought I would be done my story by now and on to the next one. And
Hmm.
so it's
Yeah. I mean, it's all about,
trying to figure it out and get over this writer's block and finish this story because I do care about it and want to see it done.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why Critical Role stopped doing Critmas at a certain point
Hmm.
because they couldn't continue just accepting gifts en masse from their audiences because there's only so much space in their house. It's like-
Yeah, exactly. Only so much space in their house, only so much time that they can open things live and
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they've had a lot of conversations about like the whole idea of like parasocial relationships too, and like the good and the bad that comes along with those types of bonds that form between them and their audiences. And I think,
Hmm.
you know, both of us can relate to that in a certain way as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I've started doing that honestly with the podcasts that I run. Everyone wants to be interviewed on my podcasts, and I'm like, yes, and do you watch Critical Role? Because they don't even like bother to look up what the podcast is about before they
Really?
come on. Yeah, like I get several emails like all the time from people who are looking to like expand their marketing presence and they just see that like I'm an active podcaster and they see that I have two active podcasts and they're like, "Can I be on your podcast?" And I'm like, "Do you even know what it's about?" Like,
That's wild. Because I know that like you've been like we've for like ever since the start of this podcast, you've been looking for more like
yeah,
guests and co-hosts on this
yeah,
podcast. It's wild that you've been getting responses, but not from people who
yeah,
actually
yeah,
like watch Critical Role and
yeah.
would have anything
Yeah, like I'm
meaningful to
happy to
say.
have them on if they are critters, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They actually know what the fuck we're talking about on here. But no, they're just people who want to take advantage of other people's audiences. Like they just want the exposure, they want the visibility without really thinking about the strategy behind how to make that happen. Um, yeah, it's so strange. I got an email the other day from a PR person who was advertising their client to me to come onto my podcasts. And she was an author, so she was somewhat related to my author podcast that I run. But my author podcast, I've specifically had to narrow the scope of it recently because of what we've been talking about. And so I'm only interviewing those authors who have demonstrable marketing success, like over 30,000 followers on social media, or like US Today bestsellers, New York Times bestsellers. Like I just want to make sure that like we have a type of caliber set with those
Hmm.
interviews. Otherwise, I'm interviewing, there are 3,400 books published a day. That's
That's
the
a lot of
statistics
books
that we're having
published
right
in a
now. And
day.
I cannot interview all 3,400 people in a day.
No.
So I had to put boundaries around how I do my interviews. And I had to respond to this email and I'm like, I'm sorry. I looked at the woman's social media presence. I looked at her, Amazon pages and I'm like, she doesn't qualify. I'm sorry. And I was like, if she is a secret critter, I'd be happy to have her on. But I doubt that that's what you're looking for because they asked about my sacred reading podcast too. And I'm like, you don't know what it is though.
No, just because it's just reading in the title
Yeah.
doesn't mean it's about books.
Yeah, I was like, have you actually looked at any of the episodes, or are you just like, you just found me and are trying to pitch your client to me because you're trying to get her more visibility?
Yeah,
It's bizarre. But yeah, it's so funny because like I'm happy to have other hosts and other guests on this podcast who are critters, and yet I'm getting requests from people who have no idea what D&D even is, let alone
wild.
Critical Role.
Wild.
Yeah, I'm like, all right, guys, like, can we just do a itsy bit more research into what you're trying to ask about? Just tiny bit, a little bit, itty bit.
Yeah,
Yeah. I wanted to interview everyone. If I had the time, I would. I love talking to,
absolutely. It's just
but
like me with my writing collaborations. If
yes,
I had the
exactly.
time and the energy and the
Yeah,
mental focus to collaborate with everybody and incorporate their
absolutely.
dragons into my story and write with them and have all these interactions, I would do it. I've been doing it for a long time, but
Absolutely.
I can't continue doing it. Like I still want to do some of it, like I said, but I can't do it with everybody
Absolutely.
the same way that I have been.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. We love you all, and we are imperfect human beings with limitations.
Yeah, and specifically in the case of like my starting, like I'm doing it as a hobby. I'm getting nothing out of it except for some audience attention, and I am doing it in my free time while I already have like a full-time job and I'm in several D&D games and
Yeah,
have a lot of other stuff going on.
I
Soon I'll
feel it.
be going for my master's and love that on the uh filling up my time as well, and yeah.
I feel it. I feel it. Well, what are we going to do about it?
I think for me, it's just gonna be, yeah, working on setting those boundaries. I already have some ideas of how to limit things without cutting things out completely, and still having ways that people can like contribute and interact in smaller ways, even if they're not a part of like the bigger written collaborations. I just need to work on communicating those boundaries in a way that doesn't hurt anybody and also enforcing those boundaries.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel that. I mean, how do you enforce boundaries in kind ways? That's really what I'm trying to do here. Like, how do I do it kindly? So, yeah, the people who do ask about the podcasts, I actually send them a bunch of links to other podcasts as a way to help out because I want to see them reach their goal. It's just I'm not the best vehicle for reaching their goal.
Yeah.
And so that's what I try to do instead of being like, all right, I hear you, and here's some other resources for you.
Yeah, I've started trying to direct some of my readers because I've got some of my readers who have a lot of really great ideas for my story but don't work with what I'm going for.
Mhm.
So I've been trying to direct them into like, hey, I would be okay if you wrote fan fiction about these characters and
Mhm.
posted on the Flight Rising forums. You just have to obviously make it clear that it's fan fiction.
Yeah.
And but trying to say that without being like, ha ha ha, you can write fan fiction of my characters and make it
Yeah.
sound like I just want like,
Yeah.
but trying to like redirect that creative energy into an outlet where they can explore all the ideas that they want to and interact with the stories in the way that they want to without it like, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think part of this setting boundaries conversation is just being aware and protecting our mental and emotional health throughout this process, which is something that I think the critical role players have gotten better at over the years as well.
absolutely.
Well, anything else we want to add before we wrap up for today? This
I
was a
can't think
much
of
longer
anything.
discussion than I was thinking it was going to be based on
Yeah.
how short the summary of this
Yeah.
episode
We
was.
found some good things to hook on to. This wasn't what I was expecting to talk about with it, but
Me neither. Me neither. But we were talking about, like public figures, and I was like, I have a point for that one. Um, this is powerful stuff that we're talking about. And audience, we definitely encourage you to share your own thoughts and feelings and insights with us as well. We'd love to know how Critical Role has impacted you in your own lives. I personally find Critical Role a fascinating case study when it comes to business development and brand development. And so I'm like always fascinated to talk about that. But special thanks to Petal for joining me. This has been a pleasure.
yeah, thanks for having me. As
Next,
always, I'm happy to be here.
yes, yeah, we always have great conversations. It's great. Next time we'll be talking about Campaign 1, Episode 39, Part 2, and joining me again will be Petal, so I'm excited for that. And as I mentioned, I'm always looking for more co-hosts and guests. Like, I want you guys to come on this podcast. I'm not a gatekeeper in that sense, but you have to at least know what Critical Role is. It's a low bar, guys. It's a low bar.
Yeah, presumably, if you're watching this and hearing this with your ears and seeing this with your eyes, presumably you know what Critical Role is.
Yeah, yeah.
So if you
I would
want to come on, we're happy to have you.
Yes, absolutely. So please reach out to me if that applies to you. In the meantime, please comment, like, subscribe below, follow us on Tumblr at Sacred Reading CR. I have not updated it in a while. I will one of these days, I promise. Until next time, may all beings be peaceful, may all beings be free, and be the chaotic good you wish to see in the world. Take care, guys.
Bye.